The moment I saw my $28,000 skid steer being hauled away on a flatbed at 6 in the morning during the worst blizzard Colorado had seen in 15 years, I knew my day was about to go sideways. I stood there in my driveway wearing nothing but thermal underwear and boots, watching the taillights disappear into the white curtain of snow, and I felt something inside me snap. My name is Paul Richardson, and I run a landscaping and snow removal business in the suburbs of Denver. I had spent the last 5 years building my company from the ground up, investing every dollar I could scrape together into equipment, employees, and reputation. This particular neighborhood, Meadowbrook Estates, had become my bread and butter over the past 2 winters. 15 homeowners paid me good money to keep their driveways clear whenever the snow fell. But more importantly, I had a contract with 3 local businesses just outside the development to keep their parking lots accessible. Those contracts alone represented 30% of my annual income. The skid steer sitting in my driveway the night before was not some vanity project. It was a Bobcat T770 with a 12-foot snow pusher attachment, and it was absolutely essential for clearing the kind of heavy, wet snow that was currently burying everything in sight. I had parked it in my driveway on my own property because I lived in Meadowbrook Estates and needed to start my route at 5 in the morning. The blizzard had been forecasted for days, and every weather service was screaming about how bad it would be. I had prepared accordingly. What I had not prepared for was Patricia Sanderson. Patricia was the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, a position she wielded like a medieval warlord commanding an army. She was 53 years old, had perfectly coiffed blonde hair that somehow never moved regardless of wind or weather, and possessed the kind of personality that made customer service representatives quit their jobs. I had managed to avoid most of her attention over the years by keeping my head down and maintaining my property to the exact specifications outlined in the HOA handbook, all 78 pages of it. But apparently, parking a piece of commercial equipment in my driveway, even temporarily, was a bridge too far. I rushed back into my house, my hands already numb from the 30 seconds I had spent outside. My phone was buzzing on the kitchen counter. 5 missed calls from clients asking when I would arrive to clear their driveways. 3 texts from the business owners asking about their parking lots. 1 email from my insurance company with a weather advisory. Nothing from the HOA. I called the towing company whose logo I had barely managed to glimpse on the flatbed. A bored-sounding woman answered on the 4th ring. "Yeah, Rapid Response Towing, this is Jen." "Hi, this is Paul Richardson. You just towed a Bobcat skid steer from 847 Willow Creek Drive about 10 minutes ago." "I need to know where it is." "Hold on." I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Yeah, got it here. That was an HOA-requested tow. Unauthorized commercial vehicle on residential property. It's at our impound lot on Industrial Boulevard." "How much to get it back?" "Tow fee is $450. Storage is $75 per day, prorated by the hour after the first 24, $450. I felt my blood pressure spike. "I will be there in 30 minutes. "Sure thing. Bring your registration and proof of insurance, cash or card." I hung up and immediately dialed Patricia's number. It went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. I tried the HOA's main line. Voicemail. I sent an email through the HOA portal, keeping my language as professional as possible despite wanting to unleash every curse word I knew. Then I got dressed in my heavy work clothes, grabbed my truck keys and headed out into the blizzard. The drive to Industrial Boulevard normally took 15 minutes. That morning, it took me an hour and 20 minutes. The roads were already buried under 8 inches of snow, and visibility was maybe 50 feet on a good stretch. My truck had 4-wheel drive and good winter tires, but even then, I had to crawl along at 15 miles per hour. I passed 6 cars stuck in ditches and 2 fender benders. Every minute that ticked by was another minute my clients were not getting their properties cleared. Every minute was another chunk of my reputation circling the drain. When I finally made it to the impound lot, a chain-link fence surrounded by industrial warehouses and auto body shops, I had to park on the street because the lot's entrance was completely snowed in. I waded through knee-deep drifts to reach the small office, a portable building that looked like it had been there since the 1980s. The woman behind the counter looked up from her phone. "Help you, Paul Richardson. I called about the Bobcat." "Right." She pulled out a form. "Need your registration and insurance." I provided both. She photocopied them with a machine that sounded like it was dying and then pushed a payment terminal toward me. $450. I swiped my card. The transaction felt like swallowing glass. "It's out back. Bay 7. You know how to work the gate. I will figure it out." She buzzed me through a door, and I trudged around the building to the impound area. Finding the skid steer took another 10 minutes because the rows were not clearly marked and everything was covered in snow. When I finally located it, I had to brush off 6 inches of powder just to get the door open. The machine started on the first try, thank God. I maneuvered it through the narrow lanes between impounded vehicles, scraping my loader bucket against a rusted sedan at one point, and made it to the gate. Getting it onto my trailer, which I had wisely brought, took another 20 minutes in the howling wind and snow. By the time I was heading back to Meadowbrook Estates, it was nearly 9 in the morning. I had missed my entire first round of clients. My phone had not stopped buzzing. 2 of the business owners had sent terse messages saying they would be contacting other snow removal companies if I did not arrive within the hour. I wanted to scream. Instead, I drove straight to the first business, a medical office complex that saw dozens of patients daily. Their parking lot was a disaster. Cars were getting stuck trying to enter. I spent the next 90 minutes pushing snow into massive piles at the perimeter, clearing lanes, and making sure the accessible parking spaces were usable. The office manager came out at one point and asked what had happened. I gave her the short version. She looked appalled. "The HOA towed your equipment during a blizzard. That's insane. Tell me about it." "Well, we appreciate you getting here. Send me an invoice for the extra time." I moved to the next location, then the next. By 2 in the afternoon, I had cleared all 3 business contracts and started on my residential clients. Most were understanding when I explained what had happened. A few were less sympathetic, pointing out that they paid for reliable service. I apologized, offered a discount on the next billing cycle, and kept working. I did not get home until almost 8 that night. My arms felt like they were going to fall off. I had not eaten since a protein bar at 6 in the morning. The blizzard had finally started to ease, but the damage was done. Nearly 2 feet of snow blanketed everything. And there, tucked under my windshield wiper, was a notice from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I pulled it out and read it under my porch light. "Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you parked a commercial vehicle on your residential property in violation of Section 12.4 of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. This vehicle was towed at your expense. Additionally, you are being fined $500 for the initial violation. Continued violations will result in further fines and possible legal action. Sincerely, Patricia Sanderson, HOA President, $500, on top of the $450 I had already paid." I crumpled the notice in my fist and went inside. I needed food and sleep in that order. But first, I pulled out my copy of the HOA's CCRs and started reading. Section 12.4 dealt with vehicle restrictions. No inoperable vehicles. No boats or RVs parked in driveways for more than 48 hours. No commercial vehicles with signage visible from the street. But the definition of commercial vehicle was vague. It mentioned trucks over a certain weight class and vehicles used primarily for business purposes. There was nothing explicitly about construction equipment, likely because nobody had thought someone would park a skid steer in their driveway. But here was the thing. My pickup truck, which I used every single day for business, was parked in my driveway right now. It had my company logo on the side. If Patricia wanted to play the letter of the law game, she was already inconsistent. I also noticed something else. Section 12.4 required written notice of a violation and a 10-day grace period to remedy the issue before any fines or enforcement actions could be taken. I had received no notice. No email, no letter, no phone call. They had just towed it. I took photos of the relevant pages and started drafting an email. The next morning, the sun came out for the first time in 3 days. The snow had stopped, and the temperature had climbed into the 20s. I spent the early hours finishing up the last of my residential clients, then returned home to find an email response from Patricia. Mr. Richardson, the violation was severe enough to warrant immediate action. Your commercial equipment was an eyesore and a safety hazard. The fine stands. Payment is due within 30 days. An eyesore. My $28,000 machine that I needed to run my business was an eyesore. I responded, attaching photos of the CCR sections I had found. Patricia, according to Section 12.4, I am entitled to written notice and a grace period. I received neither. Additionally, the definition of commercial vehicle in the CCRs does not explicitly include equipment like a skid steer, and my truck, which is in my driveway daily, is arguably more of a commercial vehicle than the Bobcat. I am formally disputing this fine and requesting reimbursement for the towing fee. Her response came within an hour. Your dispute is noted and denied. The board has full discretion in enforcement matters. This issue is closed. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. This woman was unbelievable. Over the next week, the snow started to melt, but another storm system was already forming over the Rockies. The Weather Service was predicting it would hit in 5 days. I continued my work, cleared a few smaller snowfalls, and tried to put the HOA nonsense out of my mind. Then I got a call from my neighbor, Tim Hargrove. Tim was a retired engineer, a nice guy who had lived in Meadowbrook Estates for over a decade. "Paul, you got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "I just came from an HOA meeting. You need to hear this." My stomach tightened. "Go ahead." "Patricia is bragging about towing your skid steer. She is telling everyone it was a huge win for neighborhood aesthetics, but here is the kicker. Apparently, the HOA has a contract with a snow removal company to clear the community entrance, the clubhouse parking lot, and the main roads through the development. That company just backed out." I sat up straighter. "Backed out? Why?" "They said it was not worth the liability." The contract the HOA offered was terrible, apparently. Super low pay, and the HOA wanted to micromanage every aspect of the work. The company told them to pound sand. And now Patricia is freaking out because the next storm is coming, and she has no way to clear the common areas. She is calling around trying to find someone, but nobody wants to take the job on short notice, especially with her reputation. I could not help it. I laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes from watching karma work in real time. "Thanks for the heads up, Tim." "No problem. Just thought you should know." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. The irony was almost too perfect. 2 days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello. Hi, is this Paul Richardson?" The voice was female, professional, but strained. "Yes. This is Karen Prout. I am on the board of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. I am calling because we are in a bit of a bind." Karen Prout. I knew the name. She was the vice president of the HOA, Patricia's second in command. I had seen her at a few community events. She was in her late 40s, always wore pantsuits, and generally seemed less hostile than Patricia, though that was a low bar. "What kind of bind?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Well, as you may have heard, our snow removal contractor recently terminated their agreement with us. We have another major storm coming in 2 days, and we desperately need someone to clear the common areas. I saw that you run a snow removal business, and I was hoping we could work something out." I let the silence hang for a moment. "You want me to clear the HOA's property?" "Yes. We would pay, of course, competitive rates. Karen, your president towed my equipment during the last blizzard and fined me $500 for parking it in my own driveway. Why on earth would I help you?" "I understand your frustration, and I want you to know that not everyone on the board agreed with how that was handled. Patricia made that call without consulting the rest of us. And yet the fine still stands. I am working on that, but right now we have a more immediate problem. If the common areas do not get cleared, people will not be able to get in or out of the neighborhood. It is a safety issue." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to tell her to go pound sand, just like the previous contractor had. But another part of me saw an opportunity. "Here is the deal," I said. "I will clear your common areas, but I have conditions. First, the towing fee and the fine get rescinded and I get reimbursed. Second, I want a written contract for snow removal for the rest of the season at my standard rates, with payment terms that are not exploitative. Third, I want a written apology from Patricia, on HOA letterhead, admitting that the towing was improper." Karen was quiet for a moment. "I can agree to the first two. The third one is going to be harder. Then good luck finding someone else." Wait. Let me talk to the board. Can I call you back tomorrow?" "You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, I am not interested." I hung up feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. The next day at 11:45, Karen called back. "We agree to your terms, all of them." I raised my eyebrows. Even the apology. Patricia was outvoted. The rest of the board is furious with her for putting us in this position. "I am emailing you the contract and the apology letter now." I checked my email. Sure enough, both documents were there. The contract was straightforward, offering my standard rate of $200 per hour for the skid steer and operator, with a minimum of 3 hours per storm. Payment due within 15 days of invoicing. The apology letter was brief and clearly written through gritted teeth, but it was there. "All right," I said. "I will start as soon as the snow does." The second blizzard hit right on schedule. I was ready. This time, my skid steer stayed in my driveway without incident. I cleared my business contracts first, then my residential clients, and finally rolled into the Meadowbrook Estates common areas around 2 in the afternoon. The main entrance was a mess. Snow had drifted across the lanes, blocking access. I spent an hour clearing it, pushing the snow into neat piles on either side. Then, I moved to the main roads that wound through the development. The HOA maintained 3 primary streets that connected to the individual cul-de-sacs. Clearing them took another 2 hours. By the time I got to the clubhouse parking lot, Patricia was standing outside, arms crossed, watching me work. I ignored her and kept pushing snow. When I finally shut off the machine and climbed out, she walked over. "You are really milking this, are not you?" She said, "I am doing the job you hired me to do. We would not be in this mess if you had just followed the rules." I stared at her. "Patricia, you towed my equipment during a blizzard without giving me any notice. You cost me time, money, and clients. And now you are mad because I am making you follow through on a contract. That is rich." Her face turned red. "You think you are so clever, but I am watching you. One slip up and you are out." "Good thing I do not plan on slipping up." She turned and stormed back into the clubhouse. I got back in my skid steer and finished the job. Over the next few weeks, the relationship between me and the HOA remained icy. Patricia made a point of inspecting my work after every storm, looking for something to complain about. She never found anything because I made sure every inch of the common areas was cleared to perfection. Karen, on the other hand, was professional and polite, always thanking me for the work and ensuring I got paid on time. Then, in mid-February, things escalated. I came home from a job to find another notice on my door. This time, it was a complaint about the noise from my truck. Apparently, I was starting my engine too early in the morning and disturbing the neighbors. The notice cited a county noise ordinance and demanded that I not start any vehicles before 7 in the morning. The problem was that most of my contracts required me to start work by 6 at the latest. If I could not leave my house until 7, I would lose those contracts. I called Karen directly this time, bypassing Patricia entirely. "Karen, what is this about a noise complaint?" she sighed. "Paul, I am going to be honest with you. Patricia is gunning for you. She has been looking for any excuse to fine you or force you out. This noise thing is her latest angle. But the county ordinance does not apply to residential driveways. People are allowed to start their cars whenever they need to for work." "I know, and I told her that, but she is insisting." "So what do I do?" "Ignore it. The board is not going to back her on this. She is acting unilaterally again, and frankly, the rest of us are getting tired of it." "Is there any way to get her removed from the board?" Karen hesitated. "Technically, yes. If enough homeowners petition for a special election, we could hold a vote of no confidence. But that requires a lot of signatures and coordination. It is not easy." "How many signatures?" 20% of the homeowners, so about 40 households. I thought about it. 40 signatures seemed doable, especially if other people were as fed up with Patricia as I was. "Thanks, Karen. I appreciate the heads up." Over the next week, I started talking to my neighbors. I had always been on good terms with most of them, and it turned out I was not the only one who had issues with Patricia. Tim, my neighbor who had first warned me about the HOA mess, was eager to help. So was a woman named Monica Phillips, who had been fined $300 for planting flowers in her front yard that were not on the HOA's approved list. Another guy, Jeff Carter, had been cited for having his trash cans visible from the street on a non-trash day, even though it was the day before pickup, and everyone did the same thing. Within 2 weeks, I had 47 signatures. I submitted the petition to the HOA board, following the procedure outlined in the bylaws. Karen confirmed receipt and said a special meeting would be scheduled within 30 days. Patricia did not take it well. She started sending emails to every homeowner in the development, painting me as a troublemaker who was trying to undermine the HOA's authority. She claimed I was retaliating because I had been rightfully punished for violating the rules. She even implied that I was running an illegal business out of my home, which was absurd, but her emails backfired. Most people saw through the nonsense. If anything, her increasingly unhinged messages only strengthened support for the petition. The special meeting was held on a Tuesday evening in early March at the clubhouse. The turnout was huge. Nearly 100 homeowners showed up, filling every chair and lining the walls. Karen ran the meeting, with Patricia sitting at the front table looking like she had swallowed a lemon. Karen explained the process. There would be a presentation of grievances against Patricia, followed by a defense from Patricia herself, and then a vote. A simple majority was needed to remove her from the board. I was asked to speak first. I stood up and walked to the front, my notes in hand. I kept it factual. I outlined the towing incident, the lack of proper notice, the improper fines, and the subsequent harassment. I also mentioned the other homeowners who had been unfairly targeted. I did not get emotional. I did not need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Patricia's defense was less effective. She insisted she had been doing her job, enforcing the rules and maintaining the community's standards. She accused me of being a disruptive influence and claimed that removing her would lead to chaos. Then Tim stood up and pointed out that under Patricia's leadership, the HOA had lost their snow removal contractor, failed to properly maintain the community pool, and alienated dozens of homeowners. Monica added that the HOA's finances were a mess, with thousands of dollars unaccounted for in the last budget report. That last part got everyone's attention. Karen called for a vote. It was not even close. 73 homeowners voted to remove Patricia from the board. 18 voted to keep her. She was out. Patricia stood up, her face pale, and walked out without a word. The following week, the board appointed an interim president, a retired accountant named Richard Nguyen, who had been on the board for years but had stayed in the background. One of his first actions was to conduct a full audit of the HOA's finances. What they found was stunning. Over the past 3 years, Patricia had been approving payments to a landscaping company owned by her brother-in-law. The company had been charging inflated rates for minimal work, and there were invoices for services that had never been performed. The total amount of misappropriated funds was over $40,000. Richard immediately contacted a lawyer, and the lawyer advised bringing in the police. 2 weeks later, Patricia was arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud. It made the local news. The HOA filed a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds, and her brother-in-law was also charged. In the meantime, Richard and the board worked to clean up the mess Patricia had left behind. They renegotiated contracts, fixed the budget, and implemented new oversight procedures to prevent future abuses. My snow removal contract was extended through the next season, and I was even asked to bid on some landscaping work for the common areas. Things started to feel normal again. One evening in late March, as the last of the snow was melting and the first hints of spring were appearing, Tim knocked on my door. "Hey, Paul, got a minute?" "Sure, come on in." He stepped inside, looking around at my living room. "I just wanted to say thanks for everything you did." A lot of us had been putting up with Patricia's nonsense for years, but nobody had the guts to stand up to her. "You did, and it made a difference." I shrugged. "I just did what needed to be done." "Well, it mattered. The neighborhood feels different now, better." We talked for a while longer, and after he left, I sat down and thought about the past few months. It had been a wild ride. The towing incident could have ended my business. Instead, it had led to exposing corruption, removing a toxic board president, and ultimately making the community a better place. A few weeks later, I got a call from Karen. "Paul, I wanted to give you an update. Patricia took a plea deal. She is pleading guilty to the embezzlement charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She will probably serve a year or 2 plus restitution." "Good," I said. "She deserves it." "Agreed. Also, the civil suit is moving forward. The HOA's lawyer is confident we will recover most of the stolen funds. It will take time, but we will get there." That's great news. And one more thing. The board wanted me to thank you personally, not just for the snow removal but for everything else. You could have just walked away, but you did not. You fought back, and it made a real difference. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee I was drinking. Thanks, Karen. That means a lot. As spring turned into summer, life in Meadowbrook Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new board was competent and transparent. Homeowners were more engaged. The common areas were well maintained, and my business was thriving. I even expanded, hiring 2 more employees and purchasing a second skid steer. The contracts kept coming, and my reputation, which had taken a hit during the blizzard fiasco, was stronger than ever. One Saturday afternoon, I was mowing my lawn when a car pulled up. A woman got out, someone I did not recognize. She walked over with a friendly smile. "Hi, are you Paul Richardson?" "That's me. I am Dana Harper. I just moved into the neighborhood last week. I heard about what you did with the HOA, and I wanted to introduce myself. I think it is awesome that you stood up to them." "Thanks. Welcome to the neighborhood." We chatted for a few minutes. She was a graphic designer, recently divorced and looking for a fresh start. She seemed nice. After she left, I went back to mowing, feeling pretty good about life. The following winter was much quieter. The first snow of the season fell in late November, and I was ready. My equipment was prepped, my contracts were in place, and there was no HOA drama to deal with. I cleared the common areas without incident, and Richard sent me a thank you email the same day. I also noticed something interesting. Other contractors in the area had started talking about what had happened with Patricia. Word had spread that standing up to an abusive HOA could actually work, and that homeowners had more power than they realized. A few people reached out to me for advice on dealing with their own HOA issues, and I was happy to help. In December, the HOA held its annual holiday party at the clubhouse. It was the first one I had attended in years. The atmosphere was completely different from the tense, performative gatherings under Patricia's reign. People were actually enjoying themselves. Richard pulled me aside at one point. "Paul, I just want to say again how much we appreciate everything you did. This community is in a much better place because of you." "I appreciate that, Richard, but honestly, it was not just me. A lot of people stepped up." "True, but you were the catalyst. You showed people it was possible to fight back." As I drove home that night, I thought about how strange the past year had been. It had started with one of the worst mornings of my life, watching my skid steer get towed in the middle of a blizzard. But it had ended with a stronger community, a thriving business, and a sense of satisfaction that I had done the right thing. The legal proceedings against Patricia dragged on into the new year, but eventually, everything was resolved. She was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her brother-in-law got a similar sentence. The HOA recovered $32,000 of the $40,000 that had been stolen, which was better than expected. By the time spring rolled around again, the whole ordeal felt like a distant memory. Life had moved on. The neighborhood had moved on, and I had moved on, but I never forgot the lesson I learned that winter morning when my skid steer was towed. Sometimes, standing up for yourself is not just about protecting your own interests. It is about protecting everyone who comes after you. It is about refusing to let bullies win, even when it is easier to just pay the fine and move on. Because if you do not stand up, who will? One afternoon in late April, I was sitting on my porch enjoying the warm weather and a cold beer when Tim walked over. "Hey, Paul, got a minute?" "Always." "What's up?" He sat down on the steps. "I was just thinking about everything that happened last year. It is crazy, right?" If Patricia had not towed your skid steer, none of the embezzlement stuff would have come to light. She would probably still be running the HOA into the ground. Yeah, it is weird how things work out sometimes. Do you ever regret it? All the stress and fighting, I thought about it. No. I mean, it sucked at the time, but it was worth it. The neighborhood is better now. My business is better, and I learned a lot about myself. Like what? Like I am not the kind of person who backs down when I know I am right, even if it is hard, even if it costs me something. Tim nodded. That is a good quality to have. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. Eventually, Tim stood up. Well, I should get going, but thanks again, Paul, for everything. Anytime. As he walked away, I took another sip of my beer and smiled. Life was good. The neighborhood was good. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The months continued to pass, and the neighborhood thrived. The new board implemented regular town halls where homeowners could voice concerns and vote on major decisions. Transparency became the norm rather than the exception. The community pool, which had been neglected under Patricia's leadership, got a full renovation. New playground equipment was installed at the park. Property values in Meadowbrook Estates started to climb. My business continued to grow as well. I landed a major contract with the county to clear municipal parking lots during the winter, which meant I needed to expand even further. I hired 2 more employees and leased additional equipment. By the summer, I was running a team of 7 and had more work than I could handle. Dana, the woman who had introduced herself that day while I was mowing, became a friend. We started having coffee occasionally, and she helped me redesign my company's logo and website. Her graphic design skills were top-notch, and the new branding brought in even more clients. One evening in July, she invited me to dinner. It was just the 2 of us, at a nice Italian place in downtown Denver. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you really fight the HOA?" "I mean, I know the surface reasons, but there has to be more to it." I set down my fork and thought about how to answer. I think it was about respect. Patricia treated me like I did not matter, like my livelihood and my property were less important than her need to control everything. And I realized that if I let her get away with it, I would be saying that I agreed with her, that I did not matter, and I could not do that. Dana nodded slowly. That makes sense. I think a lot of people would have just paid the fine and moved on. Maybe, but I am not wired that way. She smiled. I noticed. As the evening went on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I could tell something had changed between us. There was a warmth there that had not been before. By the time I drove her home, I was pretty sure I was developing feelings for her. But I was not ready to rush into anything. My life had been chaotic enough over the past year. I wanted to take things slow and see where they went naturally. The next winter arrived without drama. The first snowfall was light, just a few inches, and I cleared all my contracts without issue. The HOA's common areas were handled smoothly, and Richard sent his usual thank you email. It felt almost anticlimactic after the chaos of the previous year. In February, Dana and I started dating officially. It was not a grand romantic gesture, just a mutual acknowledgement that we enjoyed each other's company and wanted to see where things went. She was easy to be around, funny, and understood the demands of running a business. One Saturday, we were at my place watching a movie when my phone rang. It was Karen. "Hey, Paul, sorry to bother you on the weekend." "No problem, what is going on? I just wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia's restitution payments have been completed. The HOA got the last check yesterday. We are officially whole again." "That is great news." "It is. And I wanted to thank you one more time. None of this would have happened without you." "I appreciate that, Karen, really." After I hung up, Dana looked at me. Good news. Yeah, the HOA just got the last of the money Patricia stole. Everything is finally wrapped up. She leaned over and kissed me. You did a good thing, Paul. Not a lot of people would have had the guts to do what you did. I just did what felt right. Exactly, and that is why I like you. We went back to the movie, but my mind was elsewhere. It really was over. The whole mess with Patricia, the towing, the embezzlement, the legal battles, all of it was finally, truly over, and life was good. As spring arrived again, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in just 2 years. My business had more than doubled in size. The neighborhood was healthier and happier. I had a great relationship with Dana, and I had learned that standing up for yourself, even when it is hard, can lead to outcomes you never expected. One evening, I was sitting on my porch, the same spot where Tim and I had talked a year earlier, when Richard walked over. Hey, Paul, got a minute? Of course. What is up? He sat down. The board has been talking, and we wanted to run something by you. We are thinking of creating a community recognition award to honor homeowners who go above and beyond for the neighborhood, and we want you to be the first recipient. I was caught off guard. Seriously. What you did last year changed this place for the better. We want to recognize that. I do not need an award, Richard. I was just trying to protect my business. Maybe. But the result was bigger than that. You exposed corruption, held people accountable, and showed everyone that HOAs do not have to be toxic. That is worth recognizing. I thought about it. All right. If you think it is important, I am honored. Great. We will present it at the next community meeting. The meeting was held 2 weeks later, and I was genuinely surprised by the turnout. It seemed like half the neighborhood showed up. Richard gave a speech about the importance of community engagement and standing up for what is right. Then he called me up to the front and handed me a plaque. It was simple, just my name and a short inscription. For courage, integrity, and service to the Meadowbrook Estates community. People clapped, and I said a few words, thanking everyone who had supported me and emphasizing that the real credit belonged to the entire community for coming together. Afterward, several people came up to shake my hand and thank me personally. It was humbling and a little overwhelming. Dana was waiting for me outside. You looked uncomfortable up there. I am not great with attention. Well, you deserved it, and you handled it well. We walked home together under the stars, and I felt a deep sense of contentment. The years that followed were good ones. My business continued to thrive. Dana and I got engaged in the fall, and we were married the following spring in a small ceremony at the neighborhood clubhouse, surrounded by friends and neighbors. The HOA board remained functional and transparent, and the community continued to improve. Patricia served her sentence and moved out of state after her release. I never saw or heard from her again, and I was fine with that. Some chapters of life are meant to close completely. Looking back on that morning when my skid steer was towed during the blizzard, I could see it as a turning point. Not just for me, but for everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. It was a reminder that standing up for yourself matters, that communities are only as good as the people who fight for them, and that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones most worth fighting. And as I stood on my porch one evening, watching the sun set over the neighborhood I had helped transform, I realized that I would not change a single thing about how it all played out. Because in the end, it was not just about a skid steer or an HOA fine. It was about building a life worth living, in a place worth calling home. And that was something worth fighting for.